In round 2 of the Axis and Allies Global Tournament Final, the Soviets continued to push hard into the German forces while the British landed in France. The Imperial Japanese Navy crashed into the center of the Pacific, while the Americans dropped a shiny new fleet in San Francisco to prepare to greet them. Where do they all go from here? Well, it's time to head back to Gen Con for round 3 of the 2024 Axis and Allies Global Tournament Final. Let's make it hot. Welcome to Board Game Nation. My name is Gary Blevins. Thank you so much for watching. The sponsor of today's video is Board Game Nation. We want to invite you to join us for our very first in-person event called Battlefront Dayton. This event will be held on November 7th, 8th, and 9th, 2025 at the Hope Hotel on the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. This event will feature loads of your favorite games, including, of course, Axis and Allies. We'll be hosting the first World Championship qualifiers. Winners of these Swiss pairing tournaments will be guaranteed a seat in the corresponding events at Gen Con in 2026. We'll also have lots of casual and pickup games, as well as Axis and Allies variants for everyone to explore. Our friend Thomas Haver will be hosting the world's first diplomacy triathlon. Not to worry, there will be no running involved. This event will feature the classic diplomacy era of Empire, and a brand new diplomacy game that has yet to be announced. Very cool. Oh, and we'll have a number of special guests, including the one and only Larry Harris, creator of Axis and Allies. This event is going to be unlike anything you've ever attended. To learn more, follow the link in the description, and we look forward to seeing you at the Battlefront. Today, we are grateful to have two guests. We are excited, of course, to welcome back Robin Bielefeldt, representing the Allies, but today we're also joined by a member of the Axis team that Robin faced at that Gen Con final. Currently tied as the second winningest Axis and Allies player in Gen Con history, taking home an astounding 10 trophies over the course of his career, Charles Michalek is definitely a legend in the community, and we are thrilled that he has agreed to join us and share his thoughts on his game. Time to choose your own adventure. First, if you're brand new to Axis and Allies, thank you so much for clicking on this video, but you are definitely in the deep end of the pool. For something easier for newcomers to digest, I suggest following this link here to check out our coverage of the 2023 World Championship featuring 1942 2nd Edition. If you missed parts 1 or 2 of this series, need a refresher on the global out-of-the-box rules, or need to know more about the Global 42 setup and tournament rules, you can follow this link here or in the pinned comment below to head back to part 1. All right, time to get back in the game. All right, friends, it is time for round 3 of the Axis and Allies Global Final from Gen Con in 2024. Please welcome back our guests from rounds 1 and 2. Joining us for round 3, Robin Bielefeldt.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here.
All right, Robin, we appreciate you taking the time. And we've got another guest today that has not been able to join us until now. We are excited to welcome him, playing the opposite side of that final match, Charles Michalek. Please welcome him to the show.
Hi, everybody.
Charles, we appreciate you taking the time to be here. We've got a lot to get through today, but I wondered, before we get moving into round 3, there was a lot of questions about what some of the strategies were, or what the thinking was for rounds 1 and 2, particularly for those 6 Japanese transports. Can you tell us kind of what the overall thinking was there and how it worked out as the game progressed?
Sure. The short answer is Japan bought 6 transports because it could not afford to buy 7. The longer answer is that it was an attempt to try and force the Allies to come back into the Pacific. Robin spent some time documenting his strategy of knocking out Norway. With the 6th transport buy, I am signaling to Robin that if he keeps going into the Atlantic, I'm going to take India and Hawaii and try and win the game that way. Alternatively, if he comes back in the Pacific, buys a fleet, then I know, well, Carl only has to deal with the fleet that he bought on round 1 and not have to deal with the bombers and everything else that comes after it.
And it sounds like that was successful. So in round 2, when the Americans dropped the fleet in the Pacific, how did that change your strategy once you saw that American fleet drop in San Francisco?
At that point, I'm looking at 2 things. How many carriers do I have, and how many battleships do I have? Because what I have to do as the Axis is take the 2 victory cities, India and either Australia or Hawaii. And to take Hawaii, I need to be able to have a fleet that's going to survive his counterattack. And so if you remember at the end of round 2, I was very happy that Robin was willing to sacrifice a battleship in Midway to block me so that I could take that out. That means I have 2 battleships on the board. He doesn't have any. and I have more carriers than he has starting Japan 3.
Which is usually a pretty good place to be. This is something that Doug and I really kind of focused on when we were playing in Anniversary and in 42nd is what's the carrier count, right? How many carriers are there in the Pacific? And whoever is leading in that usually has a pretty good edge when it comes to dominance in the Pacific, and that certainly seems to carry over into this version. So once they got there, once all of that was there, now you've still got these 6 transports, and it sounds like your targets were still pretty well the same. Looks like you were going after Calcutta and Hawaii. Was that kind of the thinking? Is that where your head was at?
Yes, it was always Calcutta and Hawaii. You try and fake out, or at least make Robin think about you're going to Australia, and we'll get into a little bit of that in round 3. But the point of the strategy was, even in a 5-round game, I have a shot at both victory cities. So the 6 transports that you buy on round 1, they're going to come unload into French Indochina. And then round 4, those transports have to be back up in Japan because they will need to attack Hawaii on round 5. And the reason for that is in a 6-round game, which is what I'm expecting this to be, I have to have India and I have to have Hawaii on round 5. Unlike in Anniversary or in 42nd edition, I can't just take a victory city at the end of the game. The rules of this one are unfortunately forced me to have them the round before. And so in a 5-round game, I have to have those victory cities in turn 4. So you can see the shorter the game, really the harder it is for the Axis to try and win. In theory, it really should be a 7-round game to give the Axis enough of a chance to try and get both of those.
All right. Robin, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, if we take a look at the situation that Japan starts with, they only start with 1 factory, and that's the major factory back in Tokyo. So if they want to build additional factories or capture, say, the one either in Sydney or in Calcutta, that gives them power to project their forces a little bit further forward, but they need to be making that money too. And most of the money is tied up in China, Russia, and the Dutch East Indies. So in this game, you see, that's another reason why we went to Sumatra. That's a whole lot of money that the Japanese aren't making a return. And every dollar is important for the Japanese because they've got this huge American fleet that's coming every single turn. So it's very important for them to achieve economic parity, but then you also have to take a look at where they're buying those troops, and they have to buy all the way back in Japan and then send those guys forward in order to make a difference in the Pacific.
You know what helps with that? 6 transports on round 1 and 2 more transports on round 2. That seems to be the way to go. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and kick it off into round 3. This is our board state at the beginning here. We've got a lot of business to do in the east. Pretty good fleet in 31, but that, like we said, that American fleet just dropped in Sea Zone 10. When we look across the entirety of the Pacific, there's really 2 Japanese fleets in play here. There's one in 33 and another in 31, all of which can reach Honolulu right now. There's still the 4 transports with more than enough guys to fill them, and 36 with a naval base there, so they can make a pretty good landing in Australia if they want to, or they can make a big push into Sydney this turn if they want to, or they can stage for an attack in round 4. Definitely a couple of interesting choices there. The Chinese are starting to take back some of the spaces that the Japanese have taken away. They've got some Russian help there. In Africa, they have the 3 new mechs in South Africa that are going to be making their way north, presumably. Cairo is still looking pretty solid, but there are a lot of Axis transports in the Med and air units to go with them, plus that air base in Greece. The European theater is in a pretty precarious position for the Germans. They have a lot going on in terms of Allied landings that are happening on the West Coast. Of course, Normandy and Holland have been liberated. And of course, we've got this massive Soviet force that is moving to the west. Those units in Belarus with more tanks coming from Russia behind them. There's just a lot happening there. There is a pretty strong German force, though, in Bessarabia, currently threatening Ukraine. The Germans also have a pretty good stack. I think it's 7 guys there in Finland, but I'm not sure why they haven't stepped down into Viborg and Karelia to try to pick up those spaces and maybe draw some of the Russians back, but maybe we'll get into that in this game today. The Denmark Strait is still well controlled by the Germans, and that is stopping that fleet in the English Channel 110 from moving into 113 and sinking the Germans that are there. Lots of air power that could easily overwhelm that, but I don't think the UK wants to get into that at the moment. And, of course, the Americans still have that fleet sitting out in 91 with the 5 transports and the big stack of guys sitting in Gibraltar. They still have lots of juicy targets on the west coast of Europe, as well as throughout the Mediterranean. Plus, of course, they can make it all the way to Norway. They could land in Denmark, which might open up the UK to give them the option to move through and hit that German fleet. And, of course, they might actually even be able to land in Western Germany. We'll have to see what they end up doing there. There's lots of interesting choices from Seazone 91 with an active naval base.
We were pretty happy with the Allies' position. If you make an IPC count, like it's standard practice at the end of every round, to count up the number of IPCs that the Axis have on the board, that number right now is 106. It was 108 the previous turn, so things aren't exactly going in the Axis direction. UK landing in Europe took 5 away from the Germans. And they're going to have to find somewhere to get that money if they want to get even close to the 125 IPCs.
And that takes us into the Russians' turn, so they decide to kick us off with the 3 infantry, 8 mechs, and 2 tanks. So that is a lot of potato trucks, that's for sure. For their combat, they move into Baltic states. They move into East Poland. Those 2 seem to be their... Oh, no, there's one more. They decide to step out of Iraq and into Syria to take that unoccupied space away from the Germans. And let's see how that worked out. Of course, they took Syria without any problem. In the Baltic states and East Poland, they had a similar outcome. Looks like they were able to step into both of those spaces. They were both pretty lightly defended, so there's not much of a surprise there. Combat losses this time. The Germans lost 3 infantry and 3 artillery, and the Soviets lost just 2 in return. Pretty good trade for the Soviets there. For non-combat, they are moving down to Sichuan and into Shenxi and into Suyuan. So they're kind of spreading out there to kind of stop some of the bleeding. On the Western front, it looks like there's going to be a big party in Western Ukraine. They moved in all of the infantry, the artillery, and all of the air units landed there. They're going to mobilize all of those shiny units. Looks like it's 3 mechs into Leningrad, the rest of the mechs and the tank into Russia, and 3 infantry into Ukraine, so that it's not just a walk-in. They will have to actually do some combat there if they want to take it. And that wraps up the Russians' turn. Over to Japan for Japan's 3rd turn. They opted to purchase a shiny new carrier with 2 fighters on it and 3 destroyers. No transports this time. For Japan's combat in China, they decided to take out the guys in Hubei, or to try to take out the guys in Hubei. They also wanted that cruiser out of the way, that pesky ANZAC cruiser in 37 that was blocking the transports in 36. They send 3 fighters down there to take care of that. Out in Seazone 25, that battleship is about to have himself a bad day. Unfortunately, those air units are not accompanied by a destroyer, so that sub will not be a valid target. So the only thing that those air units can hit is going to be the battleship, and that sub will not be able to hit them. So the sub is just kind of cruising around watching the mayhem. They also sent one of the transports down from 33 with 2 guys on it to land in New Zealand to go and visit the Shire. Apparently, it's very nice down there. Of course, they were able to take Mordor with no problem with their 2 Japanese infantry. They took out the cruiser in 37 and took no losses. They were successful in Hubei, but it looks like they lost a couple of guys there. And in 25, they were able to take out that battleship, but it looks like they did lose a fighter there. Total loss this time is just a couple of guys and a fighter for Japan, so 16 for them. And the Allies lose 38 IPCs this time, so a pretty good round for Japan. For non-combat, the fighter from Hubei came back and landed in Yunnan. The two of the fighters from 37 moved over and landed in Burma, and one of the fighters headed down to Java to land there. The transports that were in 34 and 36 kind of spidered out and grabbed all of the guys off of Manila and off of Celebes and Borneo and brought them all to French Indochina. The guy from Shan State moved over to Burma, and the tank from French Indochina moved all the way across to Burma. So Burma's pretty well protected at this point. There's just not a lot of offensive power sitting in India right now. This, I thought, was curious. The fleet from 33 dropped down with the transport into 63 off the coast of New Zealand. So there's a carrier with a fighter, a battleship, and a cruiser there defending that one transport. In the center of the Pacific, the fleet from 31 dropped down to the Caroline Islands. The transports from Wake moved down with a couple of guys, and the two transports that were purchased in the last round in Japan came down to the Caroline Islands with 2 infantry and 2 artillery. There's also another transport there that was in the Caroline Islands that jumped down to New Britain to pick up the guys and brought them back up. So there's a pretty healthy stack now in the Caroline Islands. We will watch carefully to see where that goes. So when we stack it all up, it looks like there are 7 infantry and 3 artillery in French Indochina, Thailand, to go with the 5 transports that are there. That is some very efficient transports. They've got themselves 5 transports and 10 units to go on them. I like it. In Burma, there's 6 infantry, 2 artillery, 2 fighters, and a tank, and that is more than enough to stand up to anything that India might push out with. In the Caroline Islands, it looks like there's, again, 6 infantry, 2 artillery to go with the transports that are there, plus 2 loaded carriers and a battleship in that space. They go to mobilize. Of course, everything coming out of the mobilization zone is going all to splash into Sea Zone 6 with the carrier, 2 fighters, and the 3 destroyers. So, Charles, this seemed like a pretty good round for Japan. I wonder what you were thinking about it, or if you want to talk about some of the tactical choices you guys made here.
Sure. So I'm pretty happy with the way this worked out. As I said at the top, I don't know how many rounds this game's going to go, but I have protected myself so that I have a shot to win no matter how many rounds it goes. So if this were a 5-round game, and I don't think it's going to be, but if it's a 5-round game, then I need to take India round 4, and I have the ability to do that. I also have the ability to make an attack into Australia if I need to on round 4. He could block me from Hawaii if he wants to use his carrier, but I have at least a shot at 2 victory cities. In a 6-round game, which is what I'm planning for, the thought is I'm going to take all those troops that are down in New Zealand. They're going to come back up to Wake Island, and we're going to attack Hawaii and India both on round 5. At this point, I'm pretty happy. I have bought another carrier. I've bought more destroyers. And so I have him beat on battleships and I have him beat on carriers, which is what I'm, at least just looking at the board without counting everything, trying to have. The reason why you go down to New Zealand is really for a IPC count. And I was fine with it because from New Zealand, you can still get back to Wake Island. However, I will say the 2 points in New Zealand don't matter. If you look at the Eastern Front, it's not doing well, and it's not probably going to get much better. And so we're not going to get 125. And I thought that way from the beginning, which is why I did the 6 transport buy. It was always to try and take 2 victory cities. The issue is, am I going to get there before the end of the game? If the only way to win in this game were 125 IPCs, we have already lost. There's really no realistic way for us to get there. The Axis start with 112. They lose 7 right off the bat. You lose another 2 in Africa. And so now you're down to 105. The Japanese would need to take all of China, all of the northern Russian territories, and then take Celebes, and then not have Carl and Jake lose anything else. That's really a very difficult task at this point in the game. So it's got to be 6 victory cities in the Pacific or nothing.
That's really great information. I appreciate that. So how are the Americans going to respond to this Japanese aggression in New Zealand? It seems completely unacceptable. They decide to purchase 4 fighters, a transport, a destroyer, and another carrier, because you can never have too many. For their combat moves, they have none this turn. It is all about the non-combat. They decide to send a blocker out into Sea Zone 25, and they send their 3 transports with 3 infantry, 2 mechs, and an artillery to land on the Hawaiian Islands, and they move the sub from 25 down to 26. More importantly, all of the air units evacuated from Hawaii and all moved down to Queensland. The Americans now have 2 tactical bombers, 2 strategic bombers, and 2 fighters in Queensland to go with the ANZAC fighter that's already there. I think they're sensing the pressure of the 4 transports that are in the Carolines, the one that's in New Zealand, and then the 5 that are up there in C-Zone 36 that all could come in and land pretty heavily. In the European side, the big question mark was, where is that fleet going to go in C-Zone 91? Well, it is going to back up the British and the French units that are in Normandy. So they move everything into the English Channel, C-Zone 110 there with everybody else. Looks like kind of a mess, and it is kind of a mess. There's not nearly enough Axis units to threaten that space right now, and they're obviously putting a ton of pressure now onto Paris. They mobilize that giant fleet. Where does it all go? 3 of the fighters land in the western United States, 1 on the carrier with the destroyer and the transport in C-Zone 10. So it's another big Pacific fleet drop for the Americans. It seems like they've got almost all of their units in the Pacific now are in Queensland. I wonder, Robin, if you can tell us about what your thinking was down there.
Charles had kept his fleets where my airplanes could hit them, C-Zone 33E, which is just off the Carolines, also the smaller fleet off of New Zealand. So there wasn't any possibility of my going after either one of those. He needs one of those cities. He needs either Honolulu or Sydney. I decided to go ahead and put the transports with the 6 guys just to get them on the islands. I know that those transports are going to die, but when the U.S. loses 3 transports, they just go get themselves another 3 transports. What to do with the planes then? Well, I'm going to need those guys in Australia if he decides to go down there, both to have an attack against his fleet and then have an attack on any kind of landing forces, and also to defend Queensland. The idea is that if I need them back in Hawaii, they can get back to Hawaii in one turn.
Okay, so Robin, why Normandy? It's a lovely part of the French countryside, there's no doubt, but why bring everybody there? Why, instead of attacking Denmark, Norway, Western Germany, why make the non-combat move here instead of the combat move?
So we were trying to put maximum pressure on Paris. Mike had a good role. He got 6 hits on that Paris factory, so he has to either build there or he has to move significant forces in there and away from the Russian front in order to hold it. And if we get in there, it's really difficult to get us out because we've got 12 IPC French bonus where those guys get to pop up immediately. In addition, if we take a look at the turn order, after the U.S. goes in there, Germany just gets 1 shot at it, and then all the U.K. planes can land there. So it's an important position for them to defend, and they need to defend it at all costs, which is going to take more forces away from Russia that they can't really afford to bring that way.
All right, that takes us over to the Chinese for their 3rd turn. They have the ability to purchase 3 infantry this time. Again, that Burma Road is still closed. For their combat move, it does not look like they've got any combat this time. They decide to hold fast in Sichuan and hang out there, I guess, bracing for something that might come from Yunnan. We'll have to see. For their non-combat, again, they had none. They go to mobilize those 3 units, and they land in Sichuan, taking that number up to 11 Chinese infantry there, along with the 2 Russians, and those Flying Tigers are still in there on the defense. And that wraps up the Chinese turn. Over to the Germans for round 3. They are going to kick off their 3rd turn with a big chunk of mobility. They decide that they need 5 tanks and 5 mechs. We'll see where those land. For combat, they are going to try to push back into Holland. They're going to send, it looks like 3 infantry and 4 air units into that space. They're also going to try to make a pretty reasonable push into East Poland. They are going to stay out of Ukraine, which I think is interesting. There's a minor industrial complex there. It might be nice to grab that if even for a turn. I might have sent a couple of those, maybe 2 or 3 of those mechs over and the air units from Greece, but they opted not to do that. In the Mediterranean, they sent the 2 transports that were off the coast of Cyprus back over to 97 to pick up a couple of guys, plus the 1 dude in Greece, along with a couple of tanks to land in Syria to take out that Russian that is there. Their last transport decided to close the Suez Canal, which I think is pretty clever because there's a carrier sitting on the other side and a destroyer that you'd rather not see in C-Zone 98. One last combat, they did decide to step down into Karelia with 1 of the guys from Finland. They're going to take that without any trouble at all. In East Poland, they got through by the skin of their teeth, it looks like. They did keep one infantry in that fight and took out all of the Russians that were there, so they were able to capture that territory. In Holland, it looks like the same thing happened. It looks like they brought just the right number of guys. They took out the tank and the infantry that were there and had one guy surviving, so they were able to liberate that territory. They were fully successful in Syria. It looks like they lost no units there, and of course, they took Transjordan for free. Total losses this time looks like 4 German infantry against a pretty good pile of Allied pieces there. So looks like a pretty good round for the Germans all in all. For non-combat, it looks like it is all available hands to France. They're moving in 2 infantry and an artillery from West Germany and from northern Italy into that space. No air units, though, just the land units, which I thought was another interesting choice. But they moved away from the Eastern Front entirely. They moved guys out of Poland and into Germany. The 3 tanks that were in Romania moved all the way back to Germany. The tanks that were in Bessarabia moved over to Yugoslavia, along with the mechs. So all that's left is the one sorry, sad dude that's still standing in Bessarabia looking at that giant wall of Russian units. Bad day to be that dude. And the guy in East Poland, he's completely surrounded out there. In the Mediterranean, all of the air units in Greece stayed where they are, which I thought was a curious choice. Didn't really understand the point of that. There is an air base there, so if they're concerned perhaps about scrambling to defend C-Zone 99 or 97, they'll be able to do that. The strategic bomber, though, that I believe hit East Poland, came all the way down and landed in southern Italy. When you stack it all up, in Paris, they've got 6 infantry and 3 artillery plus 1 AA gun. They go to mobilize their 10 new units. That's 5 tanks and 5 mechs, all of which go into Western Germany. I guess they are staging for the perhaps liberation of Paris, but they certainly will have the ability to move back to the east if that is where they want to go. Looking across the German territories here, I wondered if this move was more about preparing to retake Paris than it was trying to defend it. To me, it seems like if you really, really wanted to defend it, then the air units would have landed there as well. The air units from Greece could have gotten over there. The air units that went into Holland could have landed there. So I wonder, Charles, what the thinking was here.
I was playing Japan. I can't play global by myself and get 6 turns. You rely on partners. You split up the board. I took Japan. I was focused on Japan. I was not focused on what they were doing. I also understood that basically they were going to lose over there. After Russia's first turn and the way things were going, I felt it was incumbent upon me to get the 6 victory cities. So I wasn't overly concerned about what was going on over there. That being said, I could try and get in the head of Carl and Jake, but there's no way for me to defend the buy. I don't think the tanks at this point are a good buy, and here's why. You need to defend Paris, not just retake Paris. If Paris falls, France gets to place 4 infantry there immediately. So it's going to be really hard to retake. I think the better build would be to rebuild the complex in Paris and to drop 3 units directly into Paris. And like you said, bring some airplanes over there to make sure Paris does not fall. As far as the thing I do agree with going into Syria. And I touched on this earlier. If we can get rid of that bonus for Russia, Russia's getting $5 a turn. So if we can get to Iraq, we can end that bonus. Iraq also gives either Italy or Germany a bonus. If Germany takes Iraq, it gets $4. I strenuously object to abandoning the Eastern Front and letting the Russians come in. But at this point, it is a Hobson's choice, right? You've got to deal with either the troops in Normandy or deal with the troops in Russia. I just feel that I would have dealt with the troops in the US and UK by building directly in France, bringing over the fighters and trying to eliminate one side of the board and then hope for the best. But with buying the tanks, we now seem to be in a worse situation where we can't deal with either. And remember, Robin's probably thinking the same thing I'm thinking. If he takes Denmark, he can come in and kill our fleet as well. And so we have to not only take everything back, that we're losing, but we have to protect Denmark. We have to protect Norway. We have to protect Finland. There are troops in Africa that aren't doing us any good. So I think we could have a stronger defense in Europe than we do have.
That all makes sense to me. I had wondered about the abandonment of the Eastern Front as well, but I can see now that the units that are in Yugoslavia, they can reach Paris on one turn, moving through northern Italy. So it almost seemed to me that they were staging for the recapture rather than the full defense of. That's not an insignificant force in France. So if the Americans or the British were trying to, or the British can't, they don't have nearly enough units, but if the Americans tried to step in there, that would be the end of the American units. They would have a couple of units left. They would almost certainly successfully take it. They'd have a couple of units left, but not nearly enough, even with 4 French units, to stand up to the massive onslaught that would come beyond that. I mean, there's 5 tanks in West Germany, there's 3 in Germany, there's 6 in Yugoslavia, plus all of the mechs that can reach there. So, I mean, it would be a pretty powerful response. You were saying that you needed to defend Denmark and the fleet in 113. Now it makes more sense why the air units landed in West Germany, because they're going to need to be able to scramble out to 110 if needed, or to 113 if they're needed out there. So I mean, I see some of the logic of it, but I think the tanks. I think you're right. I think the tanks are certainly a challenging option, and I don't understand why the air units are still in Greece.
There is a thought process on the air units in Greece. So when Japan takes India, if Japan takes India, these things are never a given. You want to have an air force that can fly into India and help defend it from any counterattack. So there's reasons for Karl to keep his air force in Greece, not only to get to India, but to protect those transports, because the only way we're going to get more troops into Syria, we'd have to ship them by those transports. So there is reason for keeping them there. As to the forces in Yugoslavia, you are correct. From there, they can get to France and help liberate it. But I want to make one point very specifically. Every territory they take on the Eastern Front, Russia gets a bonus. Poland's a $3 bonus. Romania is a $3 bonus. So when they move in, it's not that, oh, we can take it back. It's you're giving them $9, $12, $15 bonuses. And we can't afford to do that. You have to, in my opinion, stay on the Eastern Front. Once they're through, you can't stop the deluge of troops and money that's coming at you.
That takes us to UK for their third turn. They have got a bunch of really interesting options. They decide to start the turn with 3 infantry and artillery, 1 more transport, a tank, and a fighter. And on the Pacific side, again, remember the split economies here. On the Pacific side, they have the ability to buy 3 infantry this time. For their combat moves, they move over into Transjordan with an infantry and 3 air units, and they send 1 TAC bomber out into 98 to pick off the lone transport in 98 that's there by itself. They decide to make a strategic bombing run into Germany with their bomber that was located in the United Kingdom. They send 1 guy from the United Kingdom and another guy from Normandy into Holland with a swarm of British air units to try to pick off the 1 guy that is there. They don't have any combat in the Pacific theater this time. So let's see how it all worked out for them. Of course, they picked off that transport in 98 with no problem, and they stepped into Transjordan and took that space as well. They were able to take out the 1 German infantry in Holland. They did lose a guy in the trade. The bomber got shot down in Germany. Combat losses this time, it's an infantry and the bomber for the UK and an infantry, a mech, and the transport for the Germans. We got to talk about this. I am not a proponent of sending a bomber for a strategic bombing raid just so that it has something to do. Was there a value in making that risk, or what do you think about that?
This game incentivizes you to do strategic bombing raids because that's why they're called strategic bombers in this game. When you do a raid, whether it's versus an air base, a naval base, a minor factory, or a major factory with a strategic bomber, whatever number you roll, you add 2 to. So in order to shut that Paris factory down, you only need to roll a 4, 4, 5, or 6, and then that'll be maximum damage. So we could do 3 damage against the Berlin factory, or we could do 8 damage against the Berlin factory. So if we would have gotten through, but
Alas, not so much.
yeah.
That's all right. All right. So moving on, non-combat for the UK, the air units that were in Holland and Belgium moved out into the English Channel, landing on the American and British carrier that are there. One of the fighters made it all the way back to London. A guy and the AA gun moved out of the United Kingdom and into Normandy. I thought this was interesting. A fighter and the tactical bomber that had started in Egypt, hit Transjordan, moved back out to Sea Zone 80, where the carrier moved out, and it seems like they're going to try to position themselves to either liberate or to help defend the Victory City in India. Maybe that carrier is in 39 when those transports come around the corner, and then there will have to be a bunch of air units, presumably, to deal with that. So I thought that was kind of an interesting choice. They go to mobilize their shiny new units. That's 3 infantry, the artillery, the tank, and the transport with a fighter. The infantry, the artillery, and the fighter go into the United Kingdom, but the transport, a guy and a tank, are spawned down here in the Union of South Africa. It looks like that transport is set because there is a naval base there in South Africa. They can get all the way up to Egypt in one move, which I think is pretty cool. They can also land in West India in one move, which would also give them the option to perhaps liberate or at a minimum reinforce Calcutta. Plus, on the next turn, it looks like the guy in Anglo-Egypt, Sudan, plus the 3 mechs that are in Belgian Congo will also all be in Cairo checking out the pyramids. The 3 infantry, of course, on the Pacific side are going to mobilize directly into Calcutta, making it 12 infantry now in Calcutta with the 2 artillery, the 1 fighter, and 2 AA guns. And that is the UK's turn there. Any other thoughts about this one, Robin?
Yeah, so taking a look at defending India, this is where we had to make a decision whether we were going to stand and fight or whether we were going to pull out. So I'm taking a look at what Charles' position is with the Japanese. So he's got 4 fighters in play here, but because we have that fighter in India, and he could scramble out to the sea zone, if he wanted to send his transports with the troops from French Indochina to help in the invasion of India, he would have had to pull the 2 fighters out of Burma in order to escort those guys. So he would have had to take 2 fighters out, and then we don't necessarily have to scramble the fighters. So that's 2 less planes that he has in that fight on this turn. In addition, he's got forces coming down from China, presumably to go into Burma. So we were thinking he's going to wait 1 more turn and hit India in turn 4. So therefore, we made the decision that what we're going to do is stay there. When next turn comes around, we can pull those forces out of India into West India in order to save them. Land the 2 planes off of the aircraft carrier. Those guys can go to West India. The transport, the infantry, and the tank, those guys can go there.
That makes a really important point that I think is important to know for people for global. So when you have to deal with scrambles, you have to double count. So you have to essentially pretend that those fighters are going to be in both battles because it's Robin's discretion whether he's going to scramble or not. And so if I'm going to attack India, he's right. I need to have enough fighters to protect my lone transports as they're coming in. But Robin could decide not to scramble. And then, so if I position my forces that I don't have enough to take the land, right? In this particular situation, I should, but this matters more for Hawaii. Hawaii, there's 3 fighters there in most games when I'm going to attack it. So those can either scramble to protect the fleet or not. So you have to double count them. The other thing that Robin didn't mention, which is important to me, is if I send those transports in, it doesn't matter whether I win or whether I lose. I lose all of those transports. The carrier that's sitting on there has the fighter on it, and that will just kill them. So they would be going on a suicide run. I would not be able to have them to go back up to Japan or to go to Australia. So round 5 is what I'm thinking. It's too early to go in and risk it when I'm convinced I will be able to take it with 100% the round after.
Over to Italy's third turn. They are going to purchase 2 infantry and 2 bread trucks. I guess those are mechs. They look like bread trucks to me. They actually look like loaves of bread to me. I'm not gonna lie. Like that sculpt makes me laugh. For their combat move, okay, and now I have to admit an error. On the UK's turn, they actually sent one of their guys from Normandy into southern France and attacked the space in Belgian Holland with one guy from the UK, the other guy from Scotland. So my apologies. The UK do own southern France, which is going to be important because the Italians are going to attack them. So the Italians send in 2 infantry and 2 fighters into southern France to try to take over that territory. They also want to take Tunis. So they send in the 2 infantry, a fighter, and a tactical bomber after the 2 French dudes that are chilling in Tunis. And they were successful all around. They took out the UK guy in France and raised the Italian flag in that space this time. And they did the same thing in Tunisia. Looks like they lost 1 guy. Yep, they lost 1 guy in southern France. For their non-combat, the fighter and the tactical in Tunisia have to land in Libya. The 2 fighters that moved into southern France moved into France along with a tank, an infantry, and an AA gun. An infantry and artillery moved from northern Italy to West Germany. The 4 infantry that were in southern Italy moved up to northern Italy. And they also sent their 2 transports from 97 to support the units in Syria with 2 infantry and artillery and a tank. The 2 infantry and the 2 bread trucks go into Italy. The 2 infantry go to the north, and the 2 bread trucks go to the south. And that is the end of the Italians' turns. Charles, any thoughts about Italy's turn there?
Yeah, sure. I don't have as much of a problem with the Italy's buy as I did with the German tanks. I think the mechs can be useful. Not sure about Tunisia. In fact, I am sure about Tunisia. Tunisia would be a no for me. Those troops are more valuable either to protect our mainland, or those are the troops I would have used to go to Syria. I would not have our aircraft down in Africa. Those would be either in the mainland or in Syria as well. Remember, at this point, $1 in Africa is not going to help us. We're not going to get to 125. I don't care if a bomb explodes and the Russians are all dead. We have enough problems with the Americans and the British to take back Normandy. So those troops and air are either should be helping me with India to help defend it after I take it. If Robin evacuates, I want aircraft there to help me defend it on a counterattack, or they at least can take the Russian bonus in Iraq, Persia, at least try and get some more money out of it.
Over to Australia, New Zealand. What do they have in store for us this time for their purchases? 2 more guys on walkabout and an artillery for a cost of 10 IPCs. This is what their board looks like at the moment. Let's see, do they have any combat? They do not. So with no combat, we move right into their non-combat move phase. It looks like the destroyer that was off the coast of Hawaii cruises back down and parks off the coast of Queensland in Sea Zone 54. The transport decides to hightail it with nobody on them from 61 over to 60 and is kind of hanging out in the southern Indian Ocean there. And they do a little bit of a shuffle here. A couple guys go north to Queensland. One guy moves off of South Australia into Sydney. All told, it looks like the big stack's now in Queensland with 6 infantry and artillery, an AA gun, and 2 ANZAC fighters, along with of course, the American air power that's just kind of camped out there. So that's looking pretty potent. But Sydney, even after mobilizing these guys, is looking a little soft. All right, on to France for their third turn and all of their madness. They have no combat this time. I believe the thinking here is that the French cruiser comes out of 110 down to 91 with the intent of moving back into the Med to negate a bonus for the Italians. Is that what the idea here was?
Yeah, you pretty much got it right. If he decided to say, bring his fleet back, like he was gonna take the rest of North Africa, then that cruiser might have a shot at going through and killing whatever transports are there. But his fleet is off on the other side of the Med, so we were thinking that if he was going to go after it, then our cruisers are hitting pretty good in this game, so he'd have to lose Italian plane in order to get his bonus. So
the dude also stepped over into Anglo-Egypt Sudan to get ready to step into Cairo. Otherwise, the rest of the French units stayed put, which is the end of round 3. Looking across the map here, the Allies still have a pretty good handle on all of Africa. Boy, that stack in West Ukraine is looking pretty severe, particularly now that almost the entirety of the German force has moved away from there. So now there's just a couple of very scared-looking guys hanging out in East Poland and Bessarabia. China's looking pretty good. The Russians are certainly stepping in to help out. Calcutta is looking pretty precarious, but it looks like they might hold for another round. The Pacific Theater as a whole seems pretty well handled by the Japanese, which takes us into round 4. Charles, any thoughts going into round 4?
I'm as Japanese player, I'm feeling pretty good. At least, I know there's going to be, 2 rounds after this, I believe, right? So I'm going to now make my move into Wake Island and make my move back up to Japan and grab the troops. Again, I'm not thinking about Sydney or India at this point, but I feel good that I've got a shot at the 2 victory cities. I do like the fact that we've got a presence in Syria, and hopefully some of the aircraft can make its way there so that if and when I do take India, they can help defend it. Because I don't know if Robin's going to stay or go, but I feel that if I'm moving troops in for a next round attack, I'll have the numbers and all the odds. And so if he abandons it, and then I take it the next turn, I'll want planes from Europe into Syria with an air base so that I can get them into India to help me defend.
Let's get into it then. Russia 4. They are still on the move. They're building 6 tanks this time, along with 3 potato trucks. They're trying to get to Berlin, it seems like. Let's see what their combat is. They step into Poland with a guy and looks like 3 air units. That poor bastard in East Poland has the world fallen down on him, doesn't he? Oh my gosh. We got the 3 infantry stepping over from Ukraine and the fighter from West Ukraine trying to take out Bessarabia. And also, they sent up 3 guys into Karelia, that's 3-on-1, to try to take out the interloper that dared step into Soviet territory. In China, they stepped down into Kwaichao to liberate that for the Chinese. Let's see how it all turned out for them. Of course, they took Kwaichao without any trouble because it was unoccupied. No surprise, they were successful across the board here. They did lose a potato truck in Karelia. They took out the guy in Poland and took no losses. In East Poland, it's hard to tell whether or not the Russians lost anybody because there's like 7,000 guys there. And they were successful in taking Bessarabia and took no losses in that space. So it was just the one mech in Karelia that got lost, and they took out 4 German infantry that time. For non-combat, the 2 infantry moved forward essentially into Senshi and Suyuan. On the Eastern Front, again, it's a big party in East Poland with everybody there. But the 4 mechs and the tank that were in Moscow decided to head down to Rostov. And the guys that were in Belarus decided to step north into Leningrad along with the 3 fighters and the tactical bomber. But they are definitely waving the hammer and sickle in Poland at this point. So they're going to be collecting a bonus for that. And that is a victory city. So they'll be celebrating that. Before you stack everything up in Poland, this is what it looks like. And after you stack it up, isn't that nice? Isn't that nice, my friends? Stack with care. Stack with care, my friends. It's just not that hard. It's 4 infantry. It's 9 artillery. That seems like a lot. It's 3 mechs, 11 tanks, and 1 AA gun. For their mobilization, they are going to drop 3 of those tanks into Leningrad, which will certainly help with the defense of that. That's 3 mechs into Ukraine. And for the first time, we're building in Stalingrad. We're going to put 3 tanks in Stalingrad. When we look at the non-combat moves and the mobilized units phase here, it looks like we've put a pretty substantial force on the southern edge of this. Robin, can you talk to us about this?
Yeah, we were starting to move British forces up into the Middle East, most notably to make a counterattack on India. So this is the Russians starting to reinforce that idea. We really didn't need the help in Eastern Europe anymore. And the Soviets collected 52 this turn. So they're over that magic 50 number. They got their foot on the gas, and it doesn't seem like they're going to let up anytime soon.
This is the important part for me. So I don't want any Russian troops getting to attempt to liberate India. So I want troops, and that's why they're there in Syria to try and stop whatever mechs or tanks comes down there, or even try and cut down the British for a counterattack. Whatever we can do with those troops to kill them, that's what we want to do. And so Robin's saying, I'm coming down for India because, frankly, I mean, the Eastern Front is, I mean, he's going to, there's no literal way to stop what's in Eastern Poland from marching through. It's the dam is breaking. So Robin feels like he can throw stuff at India, whatever he wants. And at this point, he's right.
Well, that wraps up the Russians' fourth turn. That takes us over to the Empire of Japan. What do you decide to do here? We're going to purchase, oh my gosh, a bunch of stuff. 2 more transports, because you can never have too many. 2 tanks, an infantry, and an artillery, along with 2 strategic bombers to try to drop some pain on the Allies.
The thought of that buy is I'm going on round 5. I have bought the strategic bombers because I'm going to need them to clear or help clear the Hawaiian Sea zone. I'm going to clear any blockers, and then I'm going to use those additional transports with additional troops to help on Hawaii. That's why I bought the strategic bombers. It's not a good buy if I'm going to attack India.
So now's probably a good time to remind everybody, if you watched Doug and I's coverage of the World Championship, where they were playing Anniversary Edition, you'll remember that Doug had a partner that was also playing in the global final at the same time that Doug was playing, I believe, in the quarterfinal of the World Championship. Well, Charles was that other player. So there are several times during this game where Charles is actually over in the Anniversary Tournament playing there. So I'm guessing that this is where that miscommunication happened, that you made this purchase and then your teammates decided to make this attack into Calcutta.
So there was a miscommunication, but I was fully here for this.
See, brother, I was trying to give you an out.
I will say, yeah. So I was in control of Japan, and my teammates were in control of Europe. And apparently, Europe wasn't going so well, so they wanted to come play and help me with Japan. And I said, this is a terrible idea. It's too early to go into India. I believe that I'm going to get India 100% next turn. I'm not set up for an attack on another territory. I've already got a buy. It's not good. We probably took about half an hour arguing over this. And they're like, this is our fault if this doesn't go well. And I said, fine. I was done arguing. But the problems with it is I will lose the transports anyway. I talked about this because allies have a fighter that's going to kill them regardless. And as Robin mentioned, even if I take India now, I haven't taken any other victory city. So it's not getting me anything. I said, well, what are the odds on this battle? And, Jake and Carl were like, well, we have barely enough to take it. I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like a good idea. I have more troops that are going to come into Burma from Yunnan, where I'll have overwhelming odds the next turn. I was simply tired of arguing, and I had done it for half an hour, and I was tired, and I'm like, fine, you do what you want. And this was what they chose to do.
We can say at this point that this battle has an odds of success of about 74%. With all of the units that are going in, but again, you have to, like you said before, you've got to double count the fighter. So the fighter could have popped out and moved into 39. Again, you're a big favorite in that, but man, if you lose that, you're losing all 4 transports all 5 transports, and all of the guys that are on them are just going to sink into the Indian Ocean. And the other guys that are coming in are almost certainly just going to get wiped out. So yeah, it's a little tricky here. The alternative would have been to let those guys march, I guess. If this is turn 4, so it would be 5 to Shan State, 6 to Burma, 7 to India.
If you're having a 7-round game, correct, that's right. Or if it's a 6-round game, at least the troops that are in Yunnan can go to Burma. So you still have those. Plus, the transports that you have are not going in, so you can take some of them, and those can either be used to go back up to Japan to get troops, or, well, as you were talking about, doing something with Australia. So those transports are valuable. This way, win or lose India, we're losing all of those transports. They will all die to the British fighter on the carrier. So now they cannot help anywhere else on the board. And I need those to help Hawaii or Sydney. I still have to take another victory city.
Okay, so let's see what other combat we've got. The Japanese are not going to go into Sydney or Victoria or land in Australia in any way. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to send a bunch of air units to take out that destroyer in 54. They are also going to send, looks like the fleet from 33 is going to move up to 25 off of Midway. They're also going to bring all 4 transports and land 8 land units there in Midway against the one poor GI who's sitting there. They also have to take out the destroyer in 25 first. They also are going to send 2 fighters into Sea Zone 26. Now, it's defended by a sub, which of course isn't going to matter because the air units can't hit the sub can't hit the air units, but they can hit these transports. But there is a fighter in Hawaii that can be scrambled out if they want to do that. And they do opt to scramble that fighter from Hawaii out into 26 to try to defend those transports. They choose not to scramble any fighters out of Queensland into 54 and just kind of let that destroyer go to its devices. And in a classic head fake, they opt not to scramble the fighter from Calcutta into 39 and keep it in India on the defense. Let's see how it goes for them. Out in 26, they traded fighters, but that's a welcome trade because they are going to take 3 of those transports down to the depths with them. In 25, they did take out the destroyer, but that destroyer did manage to hit back and do damage to that battleship, so it's now tipped on its side. In 54, they did take out the destroyer, but that destroyer also hit and took down another Japanese fighter that's there. In India, this did not go well. So I watched the video of this. Unfortunately, it's just audio. There's nothing to play for you because there wasn't anything visible that happened. But what I can tell you is that on the defense, India had 14 twos that they could roll, and 9 of them hit. And as you might guess, that is statistically improbable. So 76%, 74%, whatever it was, dropped precipitously after that round. And all of the units that were part of the amphibious assault, of course, could not retreat, and those were all lost. The units that survived are the fighter, 2 infantry, 2 artillery, and a tank, and those evacuated to Burma. The fighter, of course, will land when non-combat comes around.
So it was worse than that. What you failed to mention was that we got 4 hits in the first round out of all the dice that we rolled. We got 4, and they got 9. It was a colossal failure of a battle.
Yes, it was a disaster for Japan in Calcutta. All the dice went bad. And in the end, when you put it all together, it's not great for Japan in this particular round. There's no doubt about that. Non-combat, in the subcontinent, most of the units stepped down from Yunnan to defend Burma. All of the air units in the area also landed in Burma. Burma is not in any danger of being taken. There's not nearly enough forces in Calcutta to take it. And India will likely fall on the next turn, if these forces are still here. Presumably they will be, but it will be harder because now there's 2 air units that can land there to defend it, plus they get to build again. So it won't be quite as clean as it necessarily could have been. I wonder, though, if you can talk to us about this choice out in the Pacific.
I wish I could tell you the thought process of moving up or the non-combat moves. I was busy yelling at one of my partners at this point. I had kind of lost it. I must admit, Robin's seen me play. I've never lost it at a game before. I kind of lost it at this one. I'm like, what are we doing, guys? I told you this is too early, and so Carl is moving pieces up. And, the plan was for all of that fleet to be together. Like I said, if it's all together in one space, it can't be attacked. But the non-combat moves, when Carl does it, he does not keep that fleet all together in one space. At this point, the game is in my mind over. we're not going to win. I was feeling the sickness now after the adrenaline had worn off, and I was busy, losing it. And so I can't say what would have happened, but I had sort of zoned out. I was, there was no thought process for me. I was just very angry and unhappy. I had thought I had done everything that I went the way I wanted to do it, and in the span of 60 seconds, we've lost the game and blown it, and I was just very unhappy.
Well, I believe we call that quicksand, where all of a sudden the brain goes out the window because the anxiety of the moment and of the game itself can take a hold. There's no doubt about that. It happens to some of the very best of us. It's worth mentioning at this point that Charles Michalek is one of the top 4 winners of Access and Allies tournaments at Gen Con, and you've just heard him admit that emotions got the better of him here at the end of this match here. And so to me, I take that as a comfort. Right? Like, if somebody that's got this much table time and this much table experience can have that kind of emotional reaction to this game, I feel like that makes the rest of us mere mortals feel a little bit better about our struggles as we try to handle the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, right? But at any rate, so as we get into this non-combat move, there's a consolidation of a few of the units off the coast of Midway, a battleship, 2 carriers with 1 fighter, and 2 destroyers that are there in that space. Around the Caroline Islands in Sea Zone 33, we put together 2 carriers with 4 fighters, a battleship, one of the transports. I believe that one came up from New Zealand, and then there's a cruiser also in that space. One of the things that I love about Axis and Allies is all of the little puzzles that sometimes pop up in the game. Now, you might be wondering, looking at the American forces that are over there, they've got 3 carriers with 1 fighter and 3 fighters that are on the Western United States, and a destroyer and a cruiser and 1 transport, and then the sub in 26. And then the rest of their units are all the way down in Queensland. Charles just said that this move off the coast of Midway is really pretty much the end of the game. And I want to put this out to everybody out there that fancies themselves an Axis and Allies player. Pause the video now and see if you can figure out why. Because this is a fairly advanced concept that I will tell you, having made rules videos on this exact topic, has a tendency to stump even the most advanced player. So I challenge you to take a moment, pause the video, and see if you can tell me why this is such a critical error. We'll wait.
And note, Carl did not see this, and I'm obviously not helping him. I am
Passed out on the floor.
I am hyperventilating around the floor. So
don't worry, we will reveal the answer to this question, but we'll do it on the US's turn, which is coming right up.
We were over the moon the way Mike rolled the India fight. We had a great roll on the first roll, and then it was all downhill from there. I don't know what we would have done had we lost it. Our counterattack is non-existent. The transport from South Africa with the guy in the tank on it, that guy's not in West India yet. The 2 planes from the carrier, obviously one of them has to go to kill those transports that he left. I knew that they were pretty discombobulated from that.
We did not get diced in India. First of all, you said there was 74, 75% chance. What that means is that 1 out of 4, 1 out of 5 games, you're going to lose. It's not like, oh, I've got a 70% chance, so I expect to win. You have to factor that into the account. Secondly, being diced means you had no other option, and we had another option, the more conservative option, which was to wait a turn.
So that's all of Japan's non-combat, the repercussions of which we'll talk about more as we get into the US's turn. All of this, of course, mobilizes into Japan and the 2 transports, of course, into Sea Zone 6. When we get into the Americans' turn, for their 4th turn, they are going to purchase, what are they going to buy this time? Another monstrosity. That's 4 more fighters, a destroyer, a carrier, an infantry, and a tank. That's a bunch. for their combat move, they decide to send 2 guys and their air units into southern France to try to take that back. In the Pacific, however, this is the answer to the question. What's interesting is that carriers can move into combat, and that gives a theoretical place to land for 2 air units for every carrier that moves in. Robin moved 3 carriers into the space, which means that 6 air units can move into the same space where they have no more fuel. And that gives them a theoretical place to land. When we look at Queensland, we can see that there's 2 fighters, 2 tacticals, and 2 strategic bombers that are there. If we count it up, there's an air base in Queensland that gives them 5 spaces and 7 for the strategic bombers. So if we count it up, we can see that it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces to Sea Zone 25. So they can move those 2 fighters, those 2 tacticals, and the bombers, because the bombers will be able to move and land in Hawaii, into that fight in Sea Zone 25, along with, of course, all of the units that were in the Western United States, almost all. One of the fighters can't make it because it's 4 spaces from the Western United States to Sea Zone 25. It would have 5 moves total, but they don't own Midway anymore, so it wouldn't have any place to land. So they can move in there with the 6 air units and then the 2 bombers, with the 3 carriers, the destroyer, the cruiser, and the sub, which of course is now overwhelming odds for this. And the real target here isn't the battleship or the 2 carriers or the fighter, certainly not the destroyers. It's the 4 transports that are there. If they're successful in taking this battle and sinking this fleet, that's going to strand all 8 of those land units on Midway until sometime in the Reagan administration. So they're never going to be able to move out of that space. And that is exactly how it went for them. They were able to sink that entire fleet with very minimal losses, to be entirely honest. This is what it ends up looking like. They lost 2 tactical bombers and the sub in exchange for the 1 Italian guy in southern France. He also fell, by the way, in southern France, but it's 2 destroyers, 2 carriers, a fighter, a battleship, and 4 transports for the low price of a sub and 2 tactical bombers. That's pretty gross. I'm not going to lie. For non-combat, the fighters in southern France, of course, just moved back to Normandy, and all of the fighters have to land in Sea Zone 25 on the 3 carriers that are there. So it's just 6 fighters there because the 2 tacticals fell. And the 2 strategic bombers make it over to Hawaii and end there. They mobilized the carrier and the fighter into Sea Zone 10 with the transport that's there. And of course, the additional fighters are in Western United States. And at that point, our friends on the Axis decided that's enough, and they conceded the game. Charles, you want to talk about why the decision to concede at this point?
As soon as Robin was moving the Americans, I had probably turned my ire to Carl. I was done with Jake. You know, he had got half hour's worth of me yelling, so it's Carl's turn. And I look at Carl. Carl looks at the Hawaiian board, looks at me, and I was like, okay, like we're done. I was ready to just concede like right then, because I knew you had to have everything kept together. If you split it like this, you're going to get it sunk. And not only did we get it sunk, I lost the remaining group of transports except for the 2. I mean, it didn't matter if we hit 100% of everything from now on. The game was over. So yeah, it was like, we're done.
Yeah, so just a reminder, the ways that the Axis can win this game are 125 IPCs, which we've said seems impossible now because the Russians have pushed so far into Germany. There's been no successful push into Africa to try to get any of that money. Nothing into North Asia, so none of the Far East Soviet territories have fallen to Japan. They haven't been able to take all of China, so this is where a big chunk of the money is. So the only other way to win is for Japan to get 6 victory cities on this side of the map. And once those 4 transports go down, along with a big chunk of that Japanese fleet, it looks fairly impossible, I think, to reasonably expect them to be able to get 6. Now, I still think that they probably still get Calcutta, certainly on probably Japan 5. They're almost certainly going to be able to move in here, even after losing these transports. off the coast of India. But how do you get Honolulu from here? How do you get Sydney from here? I don't really see a good way to do that. I will say in most instances, I say play on, right? Because you never know what's going to happen. But in this instance, I do not see a path for victory for the Axis. I mean, they've got 3 transports left on the map. The Americans now have 4 carriers and 6, 9, 10 fighters in play. The 2 strategic bombers are still on Hawaii. So yeah, I mean, this is getting pretty dominant pretty fast. So yeah, I completely agree. I think resignation at this point, even this seemingly early in this game. Now, again, this is still after like 5.5 hours of play, 6 hours of play. Robin, any thoughts about how this game ended?
Charles and Carl and Jake, they're all very experienced players. In order to get to a global championship final, you worked with your team for an entire year. You practiced moves. You laid things out with each other. And then you played 3 full rounds at Gen Con, 3 9-hour games, 2 of them just to get here. And then, to have it kind of blow up like this is rather unfortunate. Not only the fight in India that we won here, but just taking a look at the R1 Russia losses, and it was all downhill in Europe from there, on top of the Midway fight. Yeah, I think it was pretty much well over.
With that, I'll say again that we didn't get diced. The fact that Robin rolled well is relevant. It's a bad decision to move into Midway. So if you are playing Axis and you are playing Global 42 as Japan, you have 3 turns where you can mess around. If they're building in the Pacific, turn 4, you got to make sure all your fleet's together and it's protected somewhere, because the Americans can do that. Their bombers and their fighters can come from anywhere, and you just have to instinctively play conservative and not allow what happened to happen. It happened, and so that's hopefully a lesson that people watching this will take to heart. You always learn something, and you learn more in a defeat than you do in a victory. So I've learned 2 things out of this defeat. One is that Robin's apparently given a 13 bid before, so I know I want that next time. And number 2 is, no plan survives contact with your allies. It's not no plan survives contact with your enemy. No, Carl and Jake are fine players. Everybody makes mistakes. You win or lose as a team, and we've won and we've lost. And so it's always a pleasure to play strong opponents. I have played Mike and Robin and Steve Green many times over the years and won and lost games. So things like this happen to anybody, and you just gotta roll the punches and move on.
Oh, and there is Robin's trophy for winning that particular tournament. Congratulations to Robin and Steve and Mike for their victory of the 2024 Axis and Allies Global Final at Gen Con last year.
One thing, Gary, I want to say, or 2 things. One, like and subscribe. And number 2, Battlefront Dayton. Don't forget, sign up. It's going to be fun.
I'll send you your money, Charles. Don't worry about it. It's very nice of you to say that. That's awesome. We appreciate that. Robin, any words for the people before you go?
Well, thanks for doing this, Gary. It took me a decade to get here, to get the global championship, and win it. So I've been trying for this for a long time, and I was really happy to get there.
Well, awesome. Well, it sounds like you worked for it and you got there. So congratulations. And we will see if you can maintain that title at Gen Con this year. So we've got a whole nother set of tournaments coming up and more coverage to come. Guys, thanks again for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time. Charles, have a great night. We appreciate you.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Robin, thanks for coming by. We appreciate you hanging out.
Good night, Charles. Good night, Gary.
Thank you for watching our coverage of the 2024 Axis and Allies Global Final. Thanks again to Charles Michalek for taking the time to talk with us about his match today. And a big thanks to Robin Bielefeldt for not only appearing in all 3 videos in this series, but also putting together the annotation for the game. If you'd like a close-up look at all of the economics of this game, we have included a link in the description to that full annotation that Robin created for us. And like Charles said, make sure to check out Battlefront Dayton. It is really going to be something special. And of course, a big, giant, huge thank you to the citizens of Board Game Nation for their continued support. We could not do this without you. If you'd like to support what we're doing here, get loads of exclusive content, and engage in our fantastic community, click that join button, find the membership level that's right for you, and become an official citizen of Board Game Nation. For the live stream that follows this video, follow this link right here. To check out our other Championship Axis and Allies coverage, right this way. For our latest bit of mayhem, here you go. And if you're ready for more from Board Game Nation, click here to subscribe. My name is Gary Blevins. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you at Battlefront Dayton.